I was walking past my daughter's room when I heard her whisper on the phone, "Make it look like an accident. Nobody can suspect anything." My blood froze. I quietly backed away, pulled out my phone, and called the one person she thought was dead. The next morning, she walked into the kitchen and screamed. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. I was bringing her a cup of tea. That was all. A simple evening ritual, one of the many small services I performed for my daughter, Chloe, who'd moved back home 6 months ago. She said it was to save money while she changed careers. I believed her. The hallway was quiet, the only sound the soft shuffle of my slippers on the polished wood floor. Her bedroom door was not fully closed. A sliver of yellow light cut across the dark hall. I raised my hand to knock, the china cup warm in my other palm. Her voice stopped me. It was a low, urgent whisper, but the house was so still it carried with perfect clarity. "No, listen to me. It has to look natural. An accident." A pause. "Of course I'm sure. The policy is paid up. The house is clear. It's all just sitting there. And I'm stuck here playing nurse to a woman who waters her ferns like it's a sacred duty." The words did not compute at first. They were just sounds. Then they arranged themselves into a sentence. Then the sentence found meaning. My hand, still poised to knock, lowered slowly to my side. The teacup felt suddenly heavy. "She's old," Chloe's voice continued, dripping with a contempt I had never heard directed at me. "It wouldn't be suspicious. A fall down the stairs. Maybe something with her car. She gets confused sometimes. Everyone knows that. I do not get confused. I am methodical. I am precise. My garden thrives because of it. My accounts are in order because of it. My life, in its quiet way, is under control because of it." I felt a coldness start in my chest, a spreading numbness that locked my joints. "Next week, I'll figure out the details. Just have the paperwork ready." Another pause, a light, cruel laugh. "Yeah, a tragic loss. I'll be the grieving daughter. It'll be convincing, trust me." There was a finality in her tone, a businesslike click of a decision made. I took a step back, then another. The floorboard did not creak. I had memorized its silence years ago. I turned and walked back down the hall, each step measured and silent. I descended the stairs, my hand gliding over the smooth banister she had just nominated as my murder weapon. I entered the kitchen and set the teacup down on the counter. It made a small, definitive click. I did not turn on the light. Moonlight streamed through the window over the sink, painting the table and the chairs in shades of bone white and deep blue. I sat in my usual chair. The house was utterly quiet again. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock, the slow, deliberate beat of my own heart. The coldness in my chest thawed, and what rose in its place was not heat, but a clarity so sharp it was painful. It was not grief first, it was humiliation, a profound, degrading humiliation. All those small sacrifices, the college tuition paid in full, the down payment on her first condo, the endless loans that became gifts, they were not acts of love in her ledger. They were entries, prepayments on a death benefit. My affection was an obstacle. My routines were a joke. My life was an item on a checklist, waiting for a red line to be drawn through it. I saw our interactions of the last months with new, punishing clarity. Her impatience when I talked about my book club, her eye rolls at my careful grocery lists, her suggestions that I update my will just to be organized. She wasn't managing my affairs, she was inventorying them. I sat there for a long time. The moon moved across the window. The numbness returned, but it was different now. It was not shock. It was insulation. I wrapped myself in it. I let it settle over the raw humiliation and the first tentative flickers of fear. I examined the facts as I would examine a diseased leaf on one of my roses. My daughter wanted me dead for money. She believed I was old, predictable, and weak. She had a plan and a timeline. These were the parameters of my new reality. A strange calm descended. The questions that screamed in my mind, how could she, why would she, were irrelevant. They were emotional luxuries I could not afford. The only relevant question was, what will you do? I am a gardener. I understand that some plants become diseased. They twist and strangle the healthy growth around them. Sentiment does not save the garden. Action does. Sometimes the only remedy is a careful, precise cut, and sometimes you need a specific tool. I looked at my hands, resting on the moonlit table. They were capable hands. They had held a child, turned soil, built a life. They could do this too. I stood up. The decision was made. It felt less like a choice and more like the next logical step in a sequence I had just discovered. I walked through the dark living room, past the photos of a smiling Chloe at graduations and birthdays. I climbed the stairs, passing her closed door without a glance. In my own bedroom, I went to the large, old-fashioned wardrobe. From the top shelf, behind a stack of wool blankets that smelled of cedar, I pulled down a small, lacquered wooden box. It was a gift from a lifetime ago. I had not opened it in over 20 years. I carried it to my bed, sat on the edge, and lifted the lid. Inside were not jewels or letters. There was a single faded photograph tucked into the lid's frame. Beneath it lay a small black address book, its cover cracked with age. I picked up the book. It felt light, a skeleton of a past self. I flipped through the brittle pages, filled with names and numbers disconnected from time. Most were surely obsolete. My finger stopped on a single entry. No name, just a series of numbers, a phone code for a state I had not visited in decades, and 7 digits written in my own, younger hand. I had memorized that number once. I found I still knew it. I closed the box. I placed it on my nightstand. I would not make the call tonight. That would be impulsive. I needed to be stone. I needed to be sure. I changed for bed, performed my ablutions, and lay down in the dark. I stared at the ceiling. The woman who had taken her daughter T was gone. The woman who lay here now was someone else. She was a woman who had heard her own death sentence whispered in her home. She was a woman who knew the exact value of her love in her child's eyes. She was a woman with a box on her nightstand and a number in her mind. Tomorrow I would begin. Tomorrow I would call the man my daughter believed was dead. I did not sleep. I lay in the dark until the first gray light of dawn defined the windows. The box sat on my nightstand. I listened to the house. Chloe's alarm went off at 7, followed by the sound of her shower. The routine of the house continued, a performance I was now part of. I got up, dressed in my usual slacks and a simple blouse, and went downstairs. I made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, coffee. The motions were automatic. When Chloe came down, her hair damp, she gave me a quick smile. "Morning, Mom. Sleep okay?" "Well enough," I said, placing her plate on the table. My voice was even. It sounded like my own. "You were on the phone late." She froze for a fraction of a second, then shrugged, pouring coffee. "Just work stuff, nothing important." She took a bite of toast. "What's on your agenda today?" "A few errands," I said, sitting across from her. "The garden center, maybe the post office." I watched her face. She nodded, her eyes already drifting to her phone on the table. My imminent death was just another item on her to-do list, less interesting than a text message. The cold clarity of the night hardened into a solid, actionable plan. An hour later, I was in my car. I did not go to the garden center. I drove to a large discount store on the other side of town, a place I rarely frequented. I walked through the brightly lit aisles, a basket over my arm, and picked up mundane items: light bulbs, a new kitchen sponge, a roll of packing tape. Among these ordinary things, I selected a prepaid mobile phone from the electronics section. It was a simple, cheap device sealed in plastic. I paid in cash. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and opened the packaging. My fingers were steady. I activated the phone, following the instructions on the card, using a fake name and address. It was a bland, anonymous tool. I programmed only one number into its memory. Then I drove. I left the suburbs and took the old state highway toward the lake. It was a weekday, and the scenic pull-offs were mostly empty. I chose one overlooking the water, a place where the signal was strong and no one would overhear. I turned off the engine. The silence was complete except for the faint lapping of water against rocks below. I held the prepaid phone. I looked at the number I had keyed in. For the first time since hearing Chloe's voice through the door, I felt a tremor that was not anger or fear, but something else. A portal to another life was about to open. I pressed the call button and put the phone to my ear. It rang. Once, twice, 5 times. I was preparing for a voicemail, for a disconnected tone, for the final confirmation that this was a futile gesture. Then a click. Yeah. The voice was a low rumble, older, weathered by years and distance, but immediately familiar. It was a sound from the bedrock of my past. I had rehearsed nothing. I said the only thing that mattered. Marcus, it's Grace. The silence on the other end was profound. I could hear the faint crackle of a poor connection, maybe wind across his receiver. I thought he might hang up. Grace. He said my name like he was testing the weight of a forgotten object. That's not possible. It is. I need to speak with you. You lost the right to need anything from me a long time ago. His voice was flat but not hostile. It was a statement of fact. I know. I accepted it. This isn't about rights. It's a warning and a request. Another pause. A warning. My daughter, I said, the words clinical. Chloe. She's planning to kill me. She thinks it will look like an accident. She's discussing timelines and methods. He did not express shock. He processed it. And the request? I need you to come here. He barked a short, humorless laugh. You cut me out. You made your choice. You told me to disappear. Now you call me out of the blue because you have a problem with your kid. She thinks you're dead, I said, my voice dropping. She was a child when you left. I never corrected that assumption. To her, you are a ghost. I need a ghost right now. The line was quiet for so long I checked to see if the call was still connected. Why me? He finally asked. The question was stripped bare. Because I trust no one else. Because you are the only person I know who can handle this. Because you owe me nothing, which means you have no reason to lie to me or try to manage me. I took a breath. The lake water was very still. And because I have no one else to call. I heard him exhale, a long, tired sound. What's the situation? I gave him a concise report, my address, Chloe's description, the fact she lived with me, the overheard plan for an accident, my assessment of her impatience and entitlement. I presented it as data. You're sure? He asked when I finished. I heard her. Okay. The word was decisive. I'm several hours away. I'll leave now. I'll find a place to stay nearby. You don't know where. You don't contact me unless it's an emergency on this phone. I'll watch the house. I'll see what she does. A wave of something perilously close to relief threatened to break my composure. I clamped down on it. Thank you, Marcus. Don't thank me. This is a job. You're being hunted. I'm neutralizing the threat. That's all. I knew what he was doing. He was building a wall between this transaction and our history. It was practical. It was necessary. Understood. Grace. His voice softened just a degree. Are you safe right now? I am today. She's planning for next week. Change your routines. Be unpredictable. Check your car before you get in it. Be aware of your surroundings. Assume every step could be slick. I'll handle the rest. I will. I'll be there by nightfall. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. The conversation had lasted less than 5 minutes. In that time, the axis of my world had shifted. The problem was no longer just mine. I had an ally, one my enemy believed was a non-factor. It was the first tactical advantage I had possessed since this began. I drove home. The suburban streets looked the same, but I saw them differently. I noted blind corners, overgrown hedges that could provide cover, the patterns of my neighbors' comings and goings. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment. The house looked benign, a picture of quiet retirement. I saw a potential crime scene. Inside, I disposed of the phone's packaging in the outside recycling bin, buried under newspapers. The phone itself I kept in the inner zippered pocket of my everyday handbag. I resumed my role. I watered the ferns. I made a grocery list. When Chloe returned home that evening, I was in the kitchen preparing dinner. "How are your errands, Mom?" she asked, dropping her keys on the counter. "Fine, dear," I said, stirring a pot on the stove. The garden center was crowded. I didn't stay long. She nodded, already scrolling through her phone. I glanced out the window above the sink. The street was settling into twilight. Somewhere out there, in the gathering dark, Marcus was watching. The trap was not for me anymore. The pieces were now in place, and the game had 2 players, not 1. I served the soup. We ate in the quiet dining room, a mother and a daughter, one of us plotting a murder, the other now plotting a countermove. The silence between us was no longer comfortable. It was charged, waiting for the first move to be made. The silence of that dinner was the foundation. I went to bed that night not with fear, but with a new sense of orientation. I was no longer a victim waiting in a target circle. I was a player on a board, and I had just moved my first piece into position. Marcus was out there. My next move was to introduce his ghost into the game. The following morning, I rose early. I moved through my kitchen with deliberate purpose. I fried bacon, the sharp, salty smell filling the room. I scrambled eggs, toasted bread, brewed a full pot of coffee. I set 2 places at the sunny kitchen table with the good china, a small act of domestic theater. I needed everything to look normal, even heightened, a special breakfast for my dear daughter. I heard Chloe's footsteps on the stairs. I took a deep, quiet breath and centered myself. I had to be perfect. I had to be the woman she thought she was dealing with, slightly forgetful, wholly unsuspecting, comfortingly predictable. She walked in, dressed for work in sleek trousers and a blouse. "Wow, Mom, what's the occasion?" She smiled, but her eyes were already assessing, looking for any change in my behavior. "No occasion," I said, turning from the stove with the pan. "I was up early, thought I'd make us a proper breakfast." I served the eggs onto her plate. "You work so hard. You need your strength." She sat down, still watching me. I could see the calculation. Was this a sign of something? A sudden sentimental streak? Or just the random act of a boring woman with too much time? She decided on the latter and picked up her fork. "This is great. Thanks." I sat across from her with my own plate. We ate for a few minutes in the companionable quiet she believed was real. The sunlight streamed across the table, illuminating the dust motes in the air, the gleam of the cutlery. It was the perfect stage. "I was going through some old boxes in the attic yesterday," I said casually, taking a sip of coffee, "before I went out, trying to be organized, like you said." She nodded, her mouth full of toast. "Found all sorts of things. My college yearbooks, your father's old fishing tackle." I shook my head with a wistful smile. So many memories stuffed away in the dark. "You should really think about a storage unit, Mom, or just donate it all." Her tone was light, encouraging. The sooner my past was cleared out, the simpler her future would be. "I found a photograph," I continued, as if I hadn't heard her. I kept my gaze slightly unfocused, looking past her toward the window, playing the part of someone lost in reminiscence. "A group of us, from back before you were born. We all looked so young." I gave a soft, deliberate laugh. There was one fellow in it. Marcus, his name was. A good friend. I haven't thought of him in years. I saw her hand pause, the fork hovering halfway to her mouth. There was no dramatic startle. It was a micro-movement, a brief freezing of the muscles. She set the fork down carefully. "Marcus?" I said, taking another bite of egg. I chewed slowly, then dabbed my lips with a napkin. "Marcus Thorne. He was, well, He was important to me for a time, a lifetime ago. I let my voice trail off, implying a romantic past without stating it. "What happened to him?" she asked. Her voice was carefully neutral, but I heard the tension underneath, like a wire pulled taut. I shrugged, a gesture of elderly vagueness. "Oh, you know how life is. People drift apart. He moved away. I heard he passed on. Must be 15, 20 years ago now. A shame." I sighed, the picture of mild nostalgic regret. He was a character. I stood up to refill my coffee, turning my back to her. I needed her to have a moment alone with the information. I heard the slight scrape of her chair. When I turned back, she was still seated, but her posture was rigid. Her eyes were fixed on a point on the table. It was time for the final nudge. "I must have left the picture out," I murmured, more to myself than to her. I walked slowly to the kitchen counter near the coffee maker. There, partially tucked under the ceramic canister, was the faded photograph. I had placed it there before she came down. I picked it up and looked at it, though I knew every detail by heart. It showed a younger me, laughing, standing next to a tall, broad-shouldered man with a confident smile. "Marcus." I held it out to her. "See? That's him. Handsome, wasn't he?" Chloe took the photograph as if it were a live insect. Her fingers were stiff. She stared at it. Her face, usually so expertly composed, went pale. The blood drained from her cheeks, leaving her skin looking sallow under her makeup. She was not seeing a stranger. She was seeing a ghost that had just stepped out of a sealed history. A ghost she had believed was safely buried. "Mom!" Her voice was a dry whisper. She cleared her throat. You never mentioned him, didn't I?" I took the photo back gently, looking at it again with a sad smile. I suppose some chapters are too painful to reread, even in conversation. I placed the photo back on the counter, face up in clear view. It's funny, finding this now, just when I've been thinking about the past so much. Why now? The question was sharp, almost an accusation. I met her gaze, my own eyes wide and innocent. Why not now? At my age, the past becomes a more present companion than the future, I suppose. I gave her another gentle smile. "Don't worry about your old mom. Just a bit of spring cleaning for the mind." I turned to start clearing the dishes, the mundane action a stark contrast to the seismic shift I had just engineered. I could feel her eyes on my back, burning with a new, chaotic energy. Confusion, fear, a sudden terrifying doubt. Her plan was built on the foundation of my predictability, my isolation, my simple history. I had just shown her that history had depths she knew nothing about, and that a man she thought was dead had once been very real and very important to me. The rest of the breakfast passed in a strained quiet. She made an excuse about being late and left her plate half full. She glanced once more at the photograph on the counter before she hurried out the door. I did not look out the window to watch her go. I stood at the sink, washing the dishes by hand, the warm water flowing over my fingers. The seed was planted. It was a small, poisoned thing. I had not told her Marcus was alive. I had only resurrected his memory. Let her mind do the rest. Let her wonder why I was thinking of him now. Let her worry that my past might hold other secrets, other connections. Let her question the simplicity of her target. A hunter who starts to doubt the nature of her prey becomes careless. She begins to make mistakes. My goal was not to scare her off. My goal was to unsettle her, to make her second guess, to rush her. A rushed plan is a flawed plan, and flawed plans are easier to dismantle. I finished the dishes and dried my hands. I picked up the photograph of Marcus and me. The young woman in the picture was a stranger to me now. The man beside her was a connection to a power I had long ago set aside. I was not that young woman anymore. I was someone harder, clearer. And for the first time, I felt the old power, the survival instinct that Marcus would remember, stirring within me again. It felt like remembering how to breathe after a long time underwater. The game was truly afoot. The rest of that day passed with a strange, suspended quality. Chloe left for work in a state of distracted agitation, which she tried to mask with a brittle cheerfulness. I occupied myself with my garden. The physical work was a relief. I deadheaded the roses, feeling the dry petals crumble in my fingers. I weeded the bed of lavender, the sharp, clean scent rising around me. Each action was familiar, methodical, and it allowed my mind to settle into a state of calm readiness. I was preparing the ground, both literally and figuratively. I knew Marcus would come that night. He had said he would watch, and he was a man of his word. The garden, my sanctuary, was the most logical place for a discreet meeting. It was shielded from the neighbor's view by a tall fence and mature shrubs. The back gate opened onto a service alley. He would find it. As dusk fell, I made a simple dinner for one. Chloe texted to say she was working late, a development I noted without surprise. Her disturbed mind would be seeking reassurance, perhaps double-checking her plans. I ate, cleaned the kitchen, and performed my evening rituals. At 10 o'clock, I turned off the downstairs lights and went to my room. I did not go to bed. I changed into dark trousers and a navy sweater, clothes that would blend into the night. I sat in the chair by my window, which overlooked the back garden, and waited. The moon was a slim crescent, providing little light. The garden was a pool of shadows. I watched for movement. An hour passed. The house was silent. Then I saw it. A deeper shadow near the back gate separated itself from the darkness and moved with a slow, sure pace across the lawn. It did not approach the house. It stopped near the old stone bird bath in the center of the garden, a landmark. He was waiting for me. I rose and walked downstairs without a sound. I unlocked the back door and stepped out onto the patio. The night air was cool, carrying the heavy perfume of the night-blooming jasmine that climbed the fence. I walked across the damp grass toward the figure. He turned as I approached. The weak moonlight caught the planes of his face. Time had carved deeper lines, and his hair was more gray than black, but the essential structure of him was unchanged. His shoulders were still broad, his posture alert. He looked at me, his expression unreadable in the dark. "Grace," he said. His voice was the same low rumble from the phone, but here, in person, it vibrated in the quiet air. "Marcus, thank you for coming." He gave a slight nod, his eyes scanning the windows of the house behind me. "She's not here?" "Working late, or so she says." "Good." He looked back at me. "You've lost weight." It was an observation, not a compliment. "I suppose I have." "The photo," he said, getting straight to business. "That was smart. I saw her leave this morning. She looked spooked." "What did you say?" "I told her I found an old picture of you. I said I'd heard you died years ago." A faint grim smile touched his lips. "Not far off." He paused. "She'll be rattled. She'll either push her timeline up or make a mistake. Probably both. That is my hope." He studied me for a long moment. "You're different." "I am." The Grace I knew would have been hysterical. She would have called the police. She would have confronted the girl, screaming and crying. "That Grace died 2 nights ago," I said, my voice flat, in a quiet kitchen, listening to the clock tick. He accepted this. "What do you need from me?" "Watch, as you said. If she tries something, intervene. But subtly. Make it look like luck or my own clumsiness. I don't want her to know she's being countered yet. I just want her to grow frustrated and uncertain." "I can do that." He shifted his weight. "I've been here since yesterday. I have a room a mile away. I'll watch the house, follow her when I can. Your routines are predictable, but you've started varying them. Keep that up." "I will." An awkward silence fell between us, filled with the weight of the decades. The shared past was a presence as tangible as the jasmine scent. "You cut me out clean," he said finally, the words not accusatory, but factual. "One day I was there, the next I was a ghost. For her. For you. It was necessary," I said, the old defense coming automatically. "Was it?" He looked away toward the dark shape of the house. I did what you asked. I disappeared. I let you tell your story. I never contacted you, not once. I know. Why? He turned his gaze back to me, and for the first time, I saw a crack in his controlled facade, a raw, old pain. You never told me why it had to be that way. A clean break, you said, for Chloe's safety, for your family. I accepted that. But you never said what the real danger was. I wrapped my arms around myself against the chill. The danger was a man named Robert Vance. You remember him. Marcus's posture changed instantly, coiling into something alert and dangerous. Vance, I remember. What about him? He saw you as a threat. To his operations, to his ego, he made it clear that if you remained in my life in any capacity, the consequences would fall on my family, on my child. The words came out in a cold stream, a story I had never spoken aloud. It wasn't a bluff. You knew what he was capable of, the accident that could happen, the fire, the hit and run. He offered me a deal. You disappear publicly and completely, and he forgets we exist. I make you a ghost, and he leaves my living family alone. Marcus was utterly still. You never told me. What would you have done? I asked, meeting his eyes. You would have gone after him, and you would have died, or been imprisoned for life, and then he would have come for us anyway. This was the only solution that guaranteed Chloe would grow up safe. I had to make you dead to her to keep her alive. The night seemed to grow quieter. He processed this, his jaw working. All these years, he said slowly, I thought you chose them over me, your respectable life, your husband. I chose my daughter's life, I corrected him, my voice firm. There was no other choice to make. It was the worst thing I have ever done, but I would do it again. He let out a long, slow breath, the tension leaving his shoulders. The old narrative, the one of betrayal, was reshaped in front of him into one of brutal sacrifice. Vance is dead, he said after a moment. 5 years ago, heart attack in a federal prison. I read the obituary. He nodded. So the threat is gone, but the ghost remains. The ghost is what I need now, I said. Can you do this? Knowing why? He looked at me, and for a fleeting second, I saw the shadow of the man from the photograph. Yeah, Grace, I can do this. Consider it overdue debt collection from a dead man. He turned to leave, then stopped. Check your car brakes every morning. Be careful on the stairs. I'll be watching. Then he melted back into the shadows near the gate. I heard the faint click of the latch, and he was gone. I stood alone in my garden, the scent of jasmine suddenly overwhelming. The past was not just remembered. It was here, alive and walking, and now it was standing guard. The fear I had managed to suppress twisted once in my chest, not for my safety, but for the sheer vast loneliness of the choices that had led us here. Then it passed. I had an ally. The protector was in place. I went inside, locked the door, and prepared for the next day. The waiting was over. The moves would begin now. The morning after Marcus left my garden, I rose before dawn. His warning was a concrete instruction, not just general advice. I put on my robe and slippers, took a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, and went out to the garage. My car, a sensible sedan, sat in its usual spot. I knelt on the concrete floor, the chill seeping through my robe, and shone the light at the front wheels, then the back. I know little about mechanics, but I know what a brake line should look like. Intact. They appeared normal. No visible pooling of fluid on the inside of the tires. I checked the ground beneath the car. It was dry. I stood up, my knees protesting, and opened the driver's door. I pressed the brake pedal. It felt firm, not spongy. It seemed fine. But the act of checking was the point. It was a shift in mindset. I was no longer a woman who simply got in her car. I was a woman who inspected it for sabotage first. I went back inside and made coffee. When Chloe came down, she was already dressed, her energy brittle. "You're up early," she noted, her eyes scanning me. "Couldn't sleep," I said, which was true. Thought I'd get a start on the day. "Well, don't overdo it," she said with a strained smile. "Maybe take it easy. You've been busy lately." I heard the subtext. My slight deviations from routine were noticeable. "I'll be careful," I assured her, pouring her a cup of coffee. The promise hung between us, laced with dual meaning. The first attempt came 2 days later. It was a Thursday. Chloe had been home all morning, unusually so, flitting around with a forced domesticity. She insisted on mopping the kitchen floor. "It's looking a little grimy, Mom. Let me handle it. You just relax." I was in the adjacent living room pretending to read. I heard the splash of water, the sound of the mop sliding. She was humming. It was a performance. After she finished, she called out, "All done. It's a bit slick, though, so be careful when you come in. Maybe give it an hour to dry completely." "Thank you, dear," I called back, not looking up from my book. I waited 15 minutes. Then I walked to the kitchen doorway. The linoleum floor gleamed wet under the overhead light. The smell of lemon-scented cleaner was overpowering. It looked freshly mopped, but there was something about the sheen. It was too uniform, too thick. It didn't look like a standard mopping. It looked coated. I saw a single faint footprint leading away from the sink, deeper than a print on a damp floor should be. It looked like the print of someone who had stepped in, something oily. I did not enter. I turned around and went upstairs, using the front staircase instead of the back one that led directly to the kitchen. I busied myself in my room. An hour later, I returned downstairs. The floor was dry to the eye, but I knelt and touched it with my fingertips. It was smooth, but with a residual, almost slippery feel. Not the normal texture of a clean linoleum floor. I put on a pair of rubber-soled shoes with deep treads. I walked across the kitchen slowly, testing my weight. My grip was secure. Nothing happened. I made myself a sandwich, cleaned up, and left the kitchen without incident. Later that afternoon, I found a small folded piece of paper slipped under the back doormat. In block letters, it read, "Cleaner mixed with mineral oil, neutralized with vinegar solution. Do not use that bottle." I disposed of the note in the outside garbage bin. Marcus had been watching. He had seen her tamper with the cleaner, and he had come in after she left and counteracted it. The accident had been averted before I even knew its full design. My role had been to be cautious. His was to act. The second attempt was more direct. On Saturday, I needed groceries. I told Chloe I was going to the market. She was on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "Drive safe," she said, not looking up. I went to the garage. I performed my new ritual, a visual check of the car's underside and wheels. Again, nothing obvious. I got in, started the engine, and backed slowly down the driveway. I pressed the brake to shift into drive. The pedal sank farther than it should have, meeting less resistance. A cold jolt went through me. I pumped the pedal once. It firmed up slightly, but still felt wrong. The brake lines. She must have done it after my morning check, perhaps while I was inside getting my purse. I did not panic. I drove, but with extreme care. I pressed the brake gently, early, allowing for longer stopping distances. The supermarket was less than 2 miles away, through quiet suburban streets. I drove at 20 miles per hour. Every intersection was a calculated risk. I made it to the parking lot, chose a space far from other cars, and came to a slow, creeping stop. My hands were steady on the wheel. Inside the store, I went through the motions, picking up milk, bread, fruit. My mind was working. I could not drive the car home like this. I would have to call a tow truck, explain the sudden brake failure to Chloe. It would raise suspicion if I wasn't suitably flustered, but it would also signal that her attempt had failed without catastrophe. As I pushed my cart out of the store, I saw a figure leaning against a work truck parked near my car. It was Marcus, wearing a faded baseball cap and sunglasses. He gave a slight nod, then got into the truck and drove away. I loaded my groceries into the passenger seat. When I got into the driver's seat and pressed the brake pedal to start the car, it was firm and responsive, normal. He had fixed it in the time it took me to shop. I drove home without incident. When I walked into the house, Chloe was in the kitchen. She turned from the sink, her eyes immediately searching my face for signs of distress. "Get everything you needed?" she asked. "Yes," I said, placing the bags on the counter. The store was crowded. Took longer than I thought. I gave no indication anything was amiss. I saw the flicker of confusion in her eyes, quickly masked. Her plan had required a crisis, a scare, an accident, a call from the roadside. There had been nothing, just a mundane errand. That evening, I sent a brief text from the prepaid phone. "Brakes resolved. Thank you." The reply came minutes later. "She's getting impatient. Good. Stay alert." I was. The net was tightening, but not around me. Each failed attempt was a thread pulled taut in Chloe's mind. Her frustration was a visible thing now, a tightness around her mouth, a shortness in her tone when she thought I wasn't listening. She was a hunter whose traps kept springing empty, and a hunter who fails too often starts to wonder if she is, in fact, the one being hunted. Chloe's frustration curdled into a new, more volatile state, a watchful, prickling anxiety. The hunter was starting to feel the eyes of another predator on her back. I observed the shift in her behavior with clinical interest. She was home more often, her work excuses thinning. She moved through the house differently, less like its future owner, more like a wary intruder. Her eyes followed me, not with malice now, but with a searching intensity. She was trying to solve the puzzle of her own failure. 2 days after the brake incident, she cornered me in the living room. I was mending a tear in a linen pillowcase, a mundane task. She sat across from me, her posture rigid. "Mom, have you been talking to anyone lately?" I looked up, needle poised. "Talking to anyone? You mean on the phone?" "Yeah, or, I don't know, seeing anyone, old friends." Her gaze was sharp, trying to penetrate my calm. I smiled mildly. "At my age, dear, old friends is a dwindling category. Mrs. Wilkins from book club called about the next meeting. That's about it." I returned to my stitching. "Why do you ask?" She fidgeted, a gesture so unlike her usual controlled demeanor. "No reason. You just seem distracted sometimes, like you're thinking about something else." "I'm a woman in her late 50s, I said, not looking up. "I have a lot to think about. The past has a way of taking up more space these days." I let the statement hang, a deliberate echo of our breakfast conversation. She fell silent, but I could feel her unease filling the room. My vague references to the past were having the desired effect. They were shapeless, haunting. They gave her nothing concrete to grasp, only a growing sense that the ground beneath her plans was less stable than she thought. That night, I decided to feed the specter. It was time to make the ghost whisper. After the 11 o'clock news, I announced I was going to bed. I went upstairs, but I did not go to my room. I went into the seldom-used guest room at the end of the hall, which shared a wall with Chloe's bedroom. I closed the door quietly. I took the prepaid phone from my pocket. I had already texted Marcus an hour earlier. "Call this number in 10 minutes. Say nothing when I answer. Listen." At the appointed time, the phone vibrated in my hand. I answered it. "Hello?" I said, my voice pitched to carry just enough. I paused, as if listening to a reply. Then I continued, my tone softening into something intimate, nostalgic. "I know it's late. I needed to hear your voice." Another deliberate silence. "Thinking about that summer. By the lake. You remember." I let out a quiet, breathy laugh, the kind shared between people with history. "No, don't say that. It was a lifetime ago. But some things don't fade, do they?" I paced slowly near the shared wall, my voice a steady, murmurous stream. "It's been hard lately, feeling very alone in this house. But talking to you, it helps. It's like you're the only one who really knew me, the real me." I paused again, longer this time. I have to go. She might hear, yes. Tomorrow, good night. I ended the call. The room was silent. I stood absolutely still, listening. I heard nothing from Chloe's room, but the silence itself felt charged, brittle. I waited 5 minutes, then opened the guest room door and stepped into the hallway. As I did, I saw a sliver of light vanish from under Chloe's door. It had been there a second before. She had been standing there, listening. I allowed a small, private smile to touch my lips, a smile of satisfaction, not joy, and walked to my own bedroom. The next morning, the change in her was pronounced. Shadows under her eyes suggested a sleepless night. She jumped at the sound of the toaster popping. She scrutinized my face during breakfast, looking for signs of a secret life. "You were on the phone very late," she stated abruptly, not a question. I looked up from my tea, feigning slight confusion. Was I? I don't think so. I read for a bit and fell asleep early. You must have heard the television. It wasn't the TV. Her voice was tight. It was you, talking, in the guest room. I put my cup down slowly, frowning. "Chloe, I was in my bed all night. Perhaps you were dreaming." I offered a concerned, motherly look. "You've been under a lot of stress lately. It can affect your sleep, make you imagine things." "I know what I heard." The words snapped out, louder than she intended. She caught herself, taking a shaky breath. "I heard you, talking to someone, a man." I maintained my expression of gentle bafflement. "Sweetheart, who would I be talking to in the middle of the night? And why would I be in the guest room?" I shook my head. It was a dream. Or maybe the house settling. These old walls carry sound in strange ways. My calm denial, my attribution of her experience to stress or imagination, was more destabilizing than an admission would have been. It invalidated her reality. It made her doubt her own senses. She stared at me, and I saw a flicker of genuine fear in her eyes. Not fear of being caught, but fear of the unknown. Fear that her mother, her predictable, simple-minded target, was an entity she did not understand. She left the house soon after, claiming an early meeting. I watched her car speed down the street. The paranoia was no longer a seed. It was a vine, twisting around her logic, constricting her confidence. I cleared the breakfast dishes. The power dynamic was invisibly shifting. She was no longer just a plotter. She was a woman becoming haunted by her own conscience and by phantoms of my making. Every creak of the house, every phone ring, every quiet moment of mine was now a potential secret. She was looking over her shoulder, and in doing so, she was taking her eyes off me. A distracted hunter is a vulnerable one. The stage was set for the next, more decisive phase. I needed her off balance, questioning everything. Soon, she would be desperate enough to walk willingly into the trap I was beginning to design. Chloe's paranoia became a useful tool. Her distracted, jumpy state meant she was less observant of my actual movements. 2 days after the staged phone call, I used the prepaid phone to contact Marcus. We needed to coordinate the next phase, and it required a longer conversation than cryptic texts could allow. I suggested the public library, a place Chloe would never think to look. He agreed. I took a bus, another deviation from my routine. The library was a quiet, cavernous building downtown. I found a secluded carrel in the history section, where few patrons ventured. Marcus arrived 10 minutes later, dressed in neutral, forgettable clothing. He pulled a chair from another desk and sat at an angle to me, so we could speak in low voices while both appearing to look at the bookshelves. "She's unraveling," I said, without preamble. "I've seen her," he replied, his voice a low murmur. "She sits in her car down the street for 20 minutes before coming home. She checks her rearview mirror constantly. She's scared." "Good." I folded my hands on the table. It's time to move from defense to offense. I have an idea, but it requires the cabin. Marcus's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened. The cabin? That's remote. It is, and it's the perfect place for the kind of accident she'd envision. A fall on a hiking trail, a gas leak, a drowning in the lake. You want to invite her there. I want to suggest a trip to sort through old things, to get away. She will see it as her final, perfect opportunity. She will agree eagerly. He considered this, nodding slowly. It's a sound tactic. Control the battlefield, but it's also higher risk. If something goes wrong, help is far away. Nothing will go wrong, I said, and the certainty in my voice surprised even me. Because you will be there. He held my gaze for a long moment. I will. A silence settled between us, filled with the dust and paper smell of the library. The practical planning was done. But there was another layer, the history we had only begun to scrape. The cabin had been part of that history. It was where we had all gone, a lifetime ago. Me, my late husband Charles, a few friends, and Marcus. Before everything broke. You never asked for the details, I said, my voice dropping even lower, about Vance, about what he had on you. Marcus looked down at his hands, rough and scarred. I figured it was better not to know. I accepted the sentence you passed, knowing the specific crime wouldn't have changed it. It wasn't a crime you committed, I whispered. He went very still. His eyes lifted to meet mine, guarded. I took a steadying breath. This was the truth I had locked away for Chloe's safety. Now, with Vance dead and my daughter plotting my murder, the lock had to be broken. The night of the warehouse fire. The one they said was arson for insurance. The one they pinned on you. I was there, he said, his voice flat. My tools were there. My motives, as they painted them, were there. The evidence was compelling. Because Vance arranged it, I said. He wanted you out of the picture. You were getting too close to his racket with the building permits. You were asking questions. He offered me a choice. He could make the evidence point to you, and you would go to prison for a long, long time. Or he could make it point to Charles. The color drained from Marcus's face. Charles? Charles had gambling debts to people connected to Vance. He was vulnerable. The evidence could have been arranged just as easily against him. Maybe more easily. The memory was a cold stone in my stomach. Vance came to me. He said, "You choose. Your husband, the father of your child, goes away, or your friend takes the fall and disappears." It was not a kindness. It was cruelty with options. Marcus stared at me, his jaw tight. "You chose me to take the fall." "No," I said, the word cutting through the quiet. "I chose for you to disappear. There was a third option, one Vance allowed because it amused him. If you vanished completely, became a ghost, left the state, never contacted us again, the investigation would stall. No arrest, no trial. The case would go cold. Charles would be safe. You would be free but dead to us. It was the only way to protect you both." He processed this, the lines on his face deepening. "You made me a ghost to save me from prison and to save Charles from Vance." "To save Chloe," I corrected. "A father in prison or a family friend destroyed. Either way, the scandal, the instability would have poisoned her childhood. Vance would have made sure of it. This was the cleanest cut, the most surgical. I had to make you hate me to make it convincing. I had to let you believe I'd thrown you over for my respectable life. It was the only way you'd leave without looking back, without trying to fix it." He leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. The anger I had expected wasn't there. Instead, I saw a dawning, weary understanding. "All these years," he breathed. "I thought you were weak, that you'd chosen the easier path." "It was the hardest path," I said, my voice unwavering. "Living with your hatred was part of the price." He was silent for a full minute, looking at the rows of books, their spines a blur of color and faded titles. "Charles never knew." "No, he believed you'd run because the heat was too much. He was relieved. He was a good man, but not a strong one. He couldn't have carried the truth. And you carried it alone." I had to. I finally looked away, my own composure fraying at the edges. Now you know why the ghost had to be so complete, and why, when I needed a ghost, you were the only one I could call." Marcus nodded slowly. The old wound, festering for decades, had been lanced. The poison was draining away, leaving something raw but clean. "So the debt," he said, meeting my eyes again, "was never mine to you. It was yours to me." "I don't see it as debt," I said. "I see it as unfinished business. We were allies once against people like Vance. Now we are allies again, against a different kind of corruption." A faint, grim smile touched his lips. It was the first real smile I had seen from him since his return. "Then let's finish it. At the cabin. How do you want to proceed?" We spent the next 20 minutes outlining the practical steps. He would drive up separately and secure the perimeter. I would suggest the trip to Chloe in 2 days' time. We reviewed the cabin's layout, the trails, the potential dangers she might try to exploit. As we stood to leave, he hesitated. "Grace, for what it's worth, I understand the choice now. It was a good strategy for a commander in an impossible war. It was a mother's strategy," I replied. "Nothing more." He gave a single nod. We left the library by different doors. The past was no longer a shadow between us. It was a shared fact, excavated and examined. It gave our alliance a new solidity. The foundation for the final confrontation was no longer just tactical necessity. It was a mutual understanding, hard-won and clear. I rode the bus home, watching the suburbs pass by. The weight I had carried for 30 years felt different. Not gone, but transferred. It was now a weight we would both carry forward into the final act. The bus ride home from the library was a transition from one reality to another. In the quiet carol, Marcus and I had laid bare the past and constructed a framework for the future. Now I had to step back into the present, into the role of the unsuspecting mother, and weave the threads of the trap with seamless domestic care. I arrived home to find the house empty. Chloe was out, likely stewing in her anxiety somewhere. This was useful. I went to the small, cluttered study where my late husband's old filing cabinet stood. I pulled out the bottom drawer, the one that held personal memorabilia rather than documents. I began sorting through it, not with real nostalgia, but with the deliberate air of someone engaging in a bittersweet task. I left a small pile of photographs and old letters on the desk, visibly disturbed. Next, I went to the bookshelf in the living room and found the large, leather-bound atlas. I carried it to the coffee table and opened it to the state map. With a ruler and a pencil, I lightly traced a route from our city to the lake region where the cabin was located. I did not make it obvious. It was a faint line, something one might do while reminiscing. I left the atlas open on that page. The final prop was a brochure. I knew exactly where it was, tucked inside a cookbook, of all places. It was a faded trifold pamphlet for the lake region, showing hiking trails and fishing spots. I placed it on the kitchen counter next to the fruit bowl. When Chloe returned in the late afternoon, the stage was set. She moved quietly, her eyes taking in the disordered study, the open atlas, the brochure. She said nothing, but I could see her mind working, connecting these signs of retrospection and travel. I waited until dinner. I had made a simple pot roast, a meal that spoke of home and family. We ate in near silence for several minutes before I spoke. "I've been thinking," I began, my voice soft, contemplative. I pushed my carrots around my plate. "With all that's been happening, with me thinking about the past so much, I feel the need to get away, to clear my head." She looked up, her fork poised. "Get away? Where?" "The cabin," I said, meeting her eyes with a wistful expression. "Your father and I bought it to make memories. We haven't been up there in years, not since he passed." I sighed. There's so much of his stuff still there, and mine. Boxes of old things. I think it's time to sort through it, to decide what to keep, what to let go of. Her eyes widened slightly, the interest unmistakable. This was it. The remote location, the isolation, the emotional vulnerability. It was a gift-wrapped opportunity. The cabin, she repeated slowly. That's a long drive for you, Mom, and it's pretty rustic. Are you sure you're up for it? I'm not as frail as everyone seems to think, I said with a gentle, self-deprecating smile. I thought maybe you could come with me. For the weekend, you could help me with the heavier boxes. We could have some time together. Before... I let my voice trail off, implying an unspoken "before I'm gone" without saying it. The calculation in her eyes was almost audible. She was weighing the risk against the prize. A whole weekend, alone in a secluded place, with a mother already in a reflective, possibly careless state. It was far superior to engineered accidents in a populated suburb. She could make it look like anything. I think that's a wonderful idea, she said, her voice warming with a convincingly filial concern. You're right. It's time. And I'd love to help. When were you thinking? This weekend, I said. The weather looks clear. We could drive up Friday afternoon, spend Saturday sorting, and come back Sunday. Perfect, she said, a little too quickly. She caught herself and modulated her tone. I mean, that works for my schedule. I can clear it. It'll be good for you. For us, I corrected softly, delivering my line with perfect, tragic sincerity. She reached across the table and patted my hand. Her touch was cool. For us. The rest of the meal passed with plans. We discussed what to pack, the state of the cabin's supplies, the need to air it out. Her participation was lively, detailed. She was invested. The hunter saw the path to her quarry narrowing perfectly. That night, after she had gone to her room, I sent a final text from the prepaid phone. Invitation accepted. Weekend. She is eager. The reply came within seconds. I'll be there Friday morning. Car in woods. We'll secure premises. I deleted both messages. I stood at my bedroom window, looking out at the quiet street. The familiar view of trimmed lawns and porch lights seemed like a painted backdrop now, a set I was about to walk away from. The real drama would happen elsewhere, on an older, rougher stage. There was no fear in me. There was only a focused anticipation. Every move up to this point, the overheard conversation, the call to Marcus, the planted photograph, the thwarted accidents, the staged phone call, the revealed truths, had been a progression toward this. I had guided her here, to this decision, with the subtle pressure of a rancher guiding a skittish animal into a chute. The trap was not a physical one. It was a scenario. I had given her exactly what she wanted, the perfect setting, the perfect excuse, the perfect victim. She would walk into it believing herself the architect of my end. She would not see the other architecture surrounding hers until it was too late. I went to bed and slept a deep, untroubled sleep. The hardest part was over. All that remained was the confrontation and the rendering of justice. The drive to the cabin was a study in false normalcy. Chloe chatted about inconsequential things, the scenery, the weather, a colleague's minor drama. Her performance was polished, but I could see the tension in her hands on the steering wheel, the too frequent glances in the rearview mirror. She was anticipating the culmination of her plan, and it made her both excited and nervous. I played my part, pointing out familiar landmarks with a nostalgic sigh, commenting on how little things had changed. The cabin sat at the end of a long, unpaved road, nestled in a stand of pine and birch. It was a modest A-frame structure with a stone chimney, looking exactly as it had for decades, weathered, sturdy, isolated. We arrived in the late afternoon. The sky had turned a leaden gray, and the air held the metallic charge of an approaching storm. "We should get everything inside before the rain starts," Chloe said briskly, already popping the trunk. We carried in the groceries and our bags. The interior was cool and smelled of pine resin and dust. I moved to open windows while Chloe checked the propane tank for the stove and the circuit breakers. Her efficiency was not for my comfort, it was reconnaissance. She was surveying the potential instruments of her plot. "I'll get a fire going," she said, kneeling before the stone fireplace. "Take the chill off." I nodded, unpacking groceries in the small kitchen area. I watched her build the fire with practiced hands. Every action felt like a step in a ritual. The first flames caught, painting the room in flickering orange light. The wind picked up outside, a low moan in the trees. Dinner was a quiet affair of sandwiches. The storm broke as we finished eating, rain lashing the roof and windows. The fire was now a necessity, not an ambiance. We sat in the two worn armchairs facing it. The isolation was complete. No other lights were visible through the streaming windows. We were in a world of our own. Chloe broke the long silence. "It's peaceful out here, isn't it? So far from everything." "It is," I agreed, staring into the flames. "It makes things feel simpler." "It does." She paused. "Mom, about getting your affairs in order. At the cabin, did you bring any paperwork? Anything you wanted to go over?" This was her opening, a nudge toward discussions of wills, of wishes. I shook my head slowly. "No paperwork. That's not the kind of order I meant." "Then what did you mean?" Her voice was gentle, probing. "I meant understanding," I said, turning my gaze from the fire to her. The shadows danced across her face. I needed to understand why. Her expression froze for a second. "Why what?" "Why my daughter is trying to kill me." The words fell into the room like stones. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the drumming rain. Chloe's face went through a rapid series of adjustments: shock, denial, then a cold, calculating stillness. The mask of the daughter finally slipped away completely. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice was flat, devoid of real protest. "You do," I said, my own voice calm, conversational. "I heard you on the phone. Make it look like an accident. The slippery floor, the brake lines on my car. You've been quite creative." She leaned back in her chair, studying me. The pretense was gone. Her eyes were hard. "So you knew, all this time, from the moment you said the words. And you didn't call the police, you didn't scream, you just made breakfast." A smirk twisted her lips, but it was uneasy. "Why?" "Because I wanted to know if you'd go through with it. You did." She shrugged, a gesture of chilling nonchalance. "It's nothing personal, Mom. It's just business. You're sitting on assets I need. You're living a life that's essentially over. I'm just hastening the inevitable. And here we are, in the perfect place for an accident. A fall in the storm, a gas leak from this old fireplace." She gestured around. "It's almost too easy." "It is," I agreed. "That's why I suggested it." Her smirk faltered. "What?" "I knew you'd see it as the perfect opportunity. I led you here, Chloe. Every step. The photograph of Marcus. The late-night phone call you overheard. My sudden interest in the past. It was all to make you anxious. To make you rush. To make you agree to this trip. I needed you in a place where we could have this conversation without interruption." Her confidence wavered, replaced by a dawning suspicion. "You're bluffing. You're a lonely old woman trying to sound clever." "Am I?" I stood up slowly. I walked to the front window and looked out into the black, stormy night. "You thought I was alone. You thought the past was dead. You were wrong on both counts." I turned to face her. "You asked who I was talking to that night. It was Marcus Thorne, the man in the photograph, the man you thought was dead." Her face paled. "That's not possible." "It is very possible. He never died. I sent him away to protect you a long time ago, and I called him back to protect me now." I raised my voice slightly, just enough to be heard over the storm. "Marcus." For a moment, nothing happened. Chloe's eyes widened, flicking around the room, then she let out a derisive laugh. "Nice try, really. You had me going for a—" The back door of the cabin, which led to the small utility porch, opened. A gust of wet wind swept in, making the fire gutter, and Marcus stepped inside. He was rain-soaked, his jacket dark with water, his presence filling the cramped space. He closed the door against the storm and stood there, his eyes fixed on Chloe. She stumbled to her feet, her chair scraping loudly on the wooden floor. She stared at him as if seeing a true apparition. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Hello, Chloe," Marcus said, his voice a low rumble that matched the thunder outside. "You look like you've seen a ghost." She backed up until her legs hit the stone hearth. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. The reality of the situation, the complete inversion of power, crashed down on her. The simple, frail target was gone. In her place was a woman who had orchestrated this moment, with a figure from a buried past as her enforcer. This is a trick," she stammered, but the terror in her eyes betrayed her. "No trick," I said, moving to stand beside Marcus. The two of us faced her, a united front. "This is a reckoning. You plotted my death. You attempted it, multiple times. We have evidence. Marcus witnessed the tampering. He has photos of the brake lines. He has the contaminated cleaning bottle." Chloe looked between us, her earlier arrogance shattered, replaced by the raw panic of a trapped animal. The hunter was now undeniably the hunted. The confrontation was not physical, it was psychological, and she had already lost. The storm outside mirrored the tempest now raging behind her eyes as she understood the full scope of her miscalculation. The final move was mine to make, and she could only wait for it. Chloe's bravado evaporated. She stared at Marcus, then at me, her body rigid with shock. The firelight made her pupils look huge and black. For a long moment, the only sounds were the rain and the crackling logs. "What do you want?" she finally whispered, the question directed at me. "I want you to understand the consequences of your actions," I said. My voice was calm, the voice I used to explain why a plant needed pruning. "You are facing attempted murder, multiple counts. We have evidence. Marcus is a witness. The police would have a very strong case." Her shoulders slumped. "You're going to turn me in." "I am presenting you with a choice," I corrected her. "Option 1. I call the county sheriff now. You are arrested. You will be prosecuted. You will likely spend a significant portion of your life in prison. Your name will be associated with that crime forever. There will be no inheritance, only legal fees and infamy." She swallowed hard, her eyes fixed on the floor. "And option 2? "Option 2 is harder," I said. I walked to the small dining table and took a manila folder from my bag, which I had placed there earlier. I laid it on the table. "You will sign a notarized affidavit, which Marcus has already witnessed via a preliminary statement, detailing your plans and your actions. You will sign over to me irrevocably your power of attorney and all your financial accounts. You will also sign a quitclaim deed on the house, removing your name from any future interest." She looked up, confusion cutting through her fear. "You want my money? I'm in debt." "I don't want your money, I want control of it. You will enter a residential debt management and behavioral therapy program, a strict one, with monitored finances. I will use your assets, what little there are, and a portion of my own to pay off your legitimate debts under a structured plan. You will have no access to credit cards, no large sums of cash. Your allowance will be for necessities only, overseen by a trustee." She blinked, trying to process this. "You're putting me in financial rehab?" "I am saving you from yourself," I stated. "You plotted murder because you saw your problems as insurmountable and my life as currency to solve them. That is a sickness, of entitlement, of impatience, of moral failure. Prison would punish you. This program is designed to cure you. If you complete it successfully, a minimum of 2 years, and demonstrate sustained, independent responsibility, we will revisit the financial arrangements. Perhaps you will earn back some autonomy. But you will never again be in a position to see my life, or anyone else's, as a transaction." "And if I refuse?" she asked, but her defiance was hollow. Then Marcus drives to town tonight in this storm and brings back the sheriff. The choice is entirely yours. She looked from me to Marcus, who stood silent and immovable by the door, a living barrier to any other escape. She looked at the folder on the table, then at the fire. I saw the struggle on her face, the last twitches of pride, the bitter acknowledgement of defeat, the cold fear of prison. The storm outside seemed to pause, as if waiting for her answer. Her head dropped. Her body shuddered with a single dry sob. When she spoke, her voice was broken. "I'll take option 2. Wise," I said. I opened the folder. "The documents are here. Read them. We will sign in the morning when the storm passes and we can find a notary in town. Tonight, you will sleep in the loft. Marcus will sleep by the front door. I will sleep by the back." She didn't argue. She took the papers with trembling hands and retreated to a corner of the sofa, staring at the pages without seeming to see them. The fight was gone. The next morning, the world was washed clean. Sunlight streamed through the dripping pines. We drove in silence to the nearest town. We found a notary public at a shipping store. Chloe signed where I indicated, her signature shaky but legible. The notary, a bored-looking woman, stamped and signed without comment. Marcus and I signed as witnesses. The transaction was complete. We drove back to the city, each in our own car. Marcus followed at a distance. Chloe went to her room in my house. Within a week, she was admitted to the program, a structured facility 3 hours away. She went without protest. The fight had been drained out of her, replaced by a numb compliance. I sold the house. It held too many poison memories. With the proceeds, I bought a smaller cottage on the edge of town, one with a larger, sun-drenched yard. The closing attorney handled the transfer of Chloe's few assets into the trust. My life became quiet again, but it was a quiet of my own choosing, not a prelude to an end. Marcus helped me move. He stayed. We did not discuss what he was staying for. It was understood. He fixed the leaky faucet in the new cottage. He built raised beds for a vegetable garden in the back. One afternoon, a month after the cabin, we were working in the garden. I was planting seedlings, tomatoes, peppers, basil. He was turning the soil in the next bed over. The sun was warm on my back. "Do you think she'll make it?" he asked, not looking up from his work. "I don't know," I answered honestly, pressing soil around a basil plant. "That is up to her now. I have given her the structure and the consequence. The rest is her choice. It is the only real justice I could give, a chance to become someone else instead of just being punished for who she was." He nodded, wiping his forehead with his sleeve. "It's a harder sentence than prison. It is meant to be." We worked in companionable silence for a while. Later, we sat on the porch steps with glasses of iced tea. The new garden was a patch of raw earth and small green shoots. It would take time to grow, to establish roots. It needed care and patience and a watchful eye against weeds. I looked at it, then at the man beside me, his profile etched against the late afternoon light. The past was settled. The present was quiet. The future was an open field, ready for new growth. There was no triumphant vengeance, only a profound and peaceful reckoning. The balance had been restored.